grab your coffee or tea in my case, because today I'm joined by the host of the If You Know, You Know podcast. And we are breaking down every detail of the Billie Eilish documentary, The World's a Little Blurry, which is streaming on Apple TV. You know what I always say? I recommend listening and watching because you get good info from both, but buckle in because it's going to be a wild ride. Please welcome Natalie to the show. Nice to meet you as well. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, good. All right. To start this off, I gotta know, what is your favorite Billie Eilish song?
Oh my gosh, mine is probably like the saddest song ever. It's I Love You. Oh my
Oh,
gosh. It makes me cry every single time, but I love it. How
yeah,
about you?
her voice is just like, it's something special, I think, like for her. And we'll talk about it as we kind of get into the documentary a little bit. But Justin Bieber plays a big part in her life. And they're similar in a lot of ways, like how they became famous when they were so young. But like for him, it was because he was poppy and he kind of, no offense, JB, but like kind of molded into what people wanted to hear. And I think she became so famous because she did the total opposite, which again, we'll get into it, but like she wasn't poppy. She was like a new sound with just great vocals. And that makes her really unique. So for me, my favorite Billie Eilish song is the OG. It's Ocean Eyes, because I think the story behind it and how it was produced is crazy for how good it sounds.
Yeah, for sure. You're exactly right. She's kind of the opposite and goes against the grain, which I think a lot of people, especially now today, maybe not 10 years ago or whenever Justin Bieber started out, people would vibe with that. But I think now everybody appreciates somebody that goes against the standard. And I think that's exactly what she's doing. I love her.
Yeah. And like at the time of Justin Bieber, it was like we were a different world. And like now with
Hmm.
Billie Eilish, her mom says that she has like this quote in the documentary where she goes, everybody's telling Billie to produce a happy song, but what is there to be happy about as a teenager right now? And she
Hmm.
like breaks it down, and it was pretty morbid. She was like, climate change and school shootings. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But she's not wrong. I mean, this idea of like the angsty teen or angsty tween has been popular for a few years now, and there is a reason. So even though her music is super depressing, I do think it's really relatable to that generation and even to our generation. Like, when you
Yeah.
get into your early 20s and things like that, and things
Hmm.
seem, the world, it does seem a little blurry.
Yeah.
We're just going to go back and forth and kind of talk about the breakdown of the documentary and talk about, our thoughts and our takes on things. Again, for anyone listening, like big spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, you are going to get every detail now. So, a great segue into how it started is talking about Ocean Eyes. So Billie was only 13 when she recorded Ocean Eyes, which is literally wild. She was
Crazy.
she was a full-on child. And she produced it with her brother Phineas, which she still does today, but it actually started on SoundCloud, which is really interesting. So before it was available to stream on Spotify, Apple Music, all of that, it was just on SoundCloud. She gives them credit for her fame. She still uses a lot of these like indie music streamers, she says. And I also thought it was really cool because in these flashbacks that they provide in the documentary, Phineas has long hair, which was like very strange to see.
Yeah. I had to look up when Ocean Eyes was actually released because time is just wild lately, and I looked it up and saw that it was released on SoundCloud in 2015, I believe, and that's insane. It feels like it was just yesterday when it came out. I think I discovered it on Vine, honestly. I think that's the first place I kinda heard of it, but it's crazy to think that's already, like, 5, 6 years ago.
Well, I mean, think about like that really speaks to our age and ages
Mhm.
less, because Vine was TikTok before TikTok, and now you can find so many songs, like
Yeah.
a ton of songs that get popular now on the radio or in your everyday life start on TikTok. and they correlate with a TikTok trend.
Mhm.
So RIP Vine. But a lot of people don't know that Billie was actually, before she was a singer, she was a dancer, which is why when she's on stage, she kind of like moves a lot and knows how to move her body and like express herself that way.
Mhm.
I think dance was kind of her first love. I'm not speaking for her. That's just was my takeaway. And Ocean Eyes was recorded for the studio that the dance company, which she was a part of, I guess they probably asked her to record something because they knew had a beautiful voice and Phineas could produce and edit. And that is why Ocean Eyes was born. But we'll get into later why music became more of her number one focus versus dance. But thank God the song was under Billie and Phineas's name rather than like the studio's name, because that song is probably single handedly what got her noticed and what got her famous.
Yeah, 100%. That whole thing was just heartbreaking how I mean, it ended up, I guess, working out for the best because she sings and she's amazing in that area, but the dance part made me sad because I know a lot of people that have injured themselves, through dance and have had to quit, and it sucked to see, but
Yeah, but I believe everything happens for a reason. And this documentary was really interesting the way that it was put together. It wasn't like most documentaries. It wasn't, I wouldn't compare it to like the Justin Bieber documentary or anything like that. Even the Ariana Grande documentary, I wouldn't really compare it to. This was very much home video style, like videos
yeah.
from even before fame. There was a lot of childhood videos in it, and it was really like a compilation of memories of moments in Billie's life that make you feel like you're on the journey with her. However, in the beginning, when they're talking about Ocean Eyes, because that's what started it all off, they're talking about her performances because obviously she popped off and became huge. And you get to see her perform live. And this was really interesting to me. I think there's very few artists, in my opinion, who legitimately sound the same live that they do when you're listening to their track. And she is one of them. And that is even more impressive than the average artist because her songs are heavily edited. It's a lot of her vocal layers on top of each other, not edited in the sense of like auto tune, but edited
Mhm.
like she'll record a line multiple times and they'll be layered. So it sounds a specific way. It was humbling to see like her performing in front of these crowds with her voice sounding so similar. And of course, Phineas is like on the piano and the crowds are tiny. And then it's like warps till 3 years later and you see her performing in front of massive crowds, which we'll get
Yeah, it's
into. But
crazy.
through it all, Phineas stays as her like wingman. He still is in the back on the piano and producing the tracks and all of that stuff, which it's a story that fans can connect to, the love of a sibling. And I think that also makes her who she is and why she's so famous.
Yeah, totally. I love the style of the documentary. I love how it balances, like you said, the raw home footage, which is so amazing, by the way, that they had all of that and could use it. Like, I'm such a person who loves to film everything just because for reasons like that, that one day you can look back on it. And it was so sweet to see them growing up as like little kids with their instruments, and they're such a musical family. But I love how it was balanced between clips like that and then live performances, and the live performances made me miss concerts so much.
I know, right? I'm like, LA County just, well, not LA County, but the CDC just said if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, indoor
Yeah.
or outdoor. And LA County usually adopts these things pretty quickly. So I'm like, fingers crossed, please to God, I'm ready for it to be over.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I agree. I think it was really special that they had all this footage and it's cool that they created a documentary out of it. I mean, listen, on my podcast, I said a while ago, like before this even came out, I was like, when Justin Bieber's Holy documentary came out, where he just kind
Mhm.
of like broke down the song. And I was like, this is what is going to happen in COVID. All of these celebrities who can't perform and that's where they make their money are going to start making documentaries. And I mean, it's interesting, of course, to watch a celebrity's life and humanize them in a way, but hers was just different, I think, than most because it wasn't about um, here's how I got famous. It was like,
Yeah.
this is the part of me that people don't see and I want to show it.
Mhm. It really
And
followed her journey for, like, a couple years, like, they show her 17th birthday and then her 18th birthday, and the drastic change over, like, such a small amount of time is insane. I loved watching it.
yeah, and I mean, like, we're saying we love recording things. I think probably a lot of these artists have home videos that they can show and share. Her team just did it really well and kind
Mhm.
of did it first. Um, but I think a big part of that too is how she grew up and why there's so much home footage because of how she grew up. So she talks about why she's so musically inclined, her and Phineas both. And they say, her mom taught her how to do songwriting, which I'm sure is also who Phineas learned from because they co-write, but she says that she hates to write songs and
Yeah.
Phineas like loves it and is really good at it. So their mom taught them that. And then her dad taught her how to play the ukulele and the piano. So as we know, Phineas plays the piano. Billie actually started with ukulele covers. If
Mhm.
if anybody's like an OG fan and was following her on SoundCloud
Yeah.
when she, was before fame. And I I don't think a lot has changed. I think she's still writing and recording her music in the same house. She's still sitting in her brother's room on his bed in that
Yeah.
house. And I think the big thing I took away from this documentary, of course, it's Billie's documentary, but like in my head, all of this just shows how amazing of a producer Phineas is because it's one thing to be able to, you know, vocally like sing the songs in a room and sitting and not standing and all that kind of stuff. But to be able to take that audio and make it sound the way that her songs sound is crazy. Like for anybody in production, you know how much goes into editing, and that is just crazy.
Yeah, it was wild to watch scenes of them breaking down each song and, like, growing a song out of nowhere that ended up becoming huge, that whole album, and to see it all start in their bedroom, and it's I can't even wrap my head around the fact that that album was made all in their childhood home. It's insane.
Yeah, but I think it's so humbling too because like I'm going to use Justin Bieber again as an example. Like
Mhm.
a lot of what we see with these child celebrities is exactly what happened with Justin Bieber, which is like they grow up and we love them and then they have they do something, they mess up in some way because they're in the public eye. And a lot of that comes from the fame of like having fans and followers and all that stuff, which she has. But I think a lot of it comes with the lifestyle too, where you're like constantly, away from home, away from your family. You have no solid friend group. At least for Billie, she has that. At least she's keeping that part of her life the same. So hopefully we can avoid those
Yeah.
kind of things, which we'll talk about later because in her new album, she writes music about drug use and things like that, which comes up as an issue, but we'll get into it. I think a lot of people struggle with the issues that Billie sings about with mental health and depression and, feeling like you don't have a purpose or you don't know where you belong.
Mhm.
And some might think that she wrote a sad song and it was a hit. And so she said, this is my sweet spot and let's keep writing sad music. But in the documentary, she shows her personal journal, which goes back like years, even before Ocean Eyes. And in the journal, she has visions of, her emotions. She writes down poems and sketches and whatever. And what was so full circle was when she shows her depiction of her feelings, which is like, wings and this like black liquid. And she's saying this is like prior to the album and prior to all the music videos.
Yeah.
She says in that home video to Phineas, she's like, I want to, here's how I envision it. I envision wings and I envision me drinking this black liquid and then it's like pouring out of my eyes. And the camera like pans to Phineas and he rolls his eyes.
Yeah.
And then, as we all know, that's exactly what happened, and it wasn't just her idea, the video, but she also really was involved in the creative process. She shows home videos of her, like, this was so pure. Her mom sitting in the backyard, and Billie like
Yeah.
has the camera, and she's like, "Okay, pick up the glass. No, no, not like that. Like a little turned." And she's like, "This is the angle I want. I don't want anything else showing." And
Mhm.
she's really like directing it to bring it to production and show the actual directors her vision. And
I
I don't
lo
think a lot of people know how involved she was in the creative direction of her music videos, which is super impressive because she's still really young.
Yeah, that's something I respect and admire her, like, so much for. I love the way they did that scene where they showed her flipping through the journal, mentioning that in the future she wanted to do something where she drinks black liquid and it starts to come out of her eyes, and then I think it goes straight from that scene to the one of her directing her mom in the backyard, and God bless her mom for just being, like, so patient and like, so willing to participate and kinda be her model while she tried to like work this vision out. And then I think it went from that to her actually filming the real music video, I guess maybe a year or so later. And it was so cool to see how full circle it came. And I know she's very particular with like her vision and everything, which I respect as an artist. And it was funny to watch how she kind of was like disagreeing or clashing with the actual director of that video, and how when they finally wrapped, she kind of mentioned to her own people, like, from now on, I'm directing all my own videos, like, I'm doing it myself, which I love.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we look at what happened, so obviously we know what we're talking about, but just so the audience knows,
Yeah.
we're talking about the music video for When We're Asleep, Where Do We Go?
Mhm.
And that was the music video. That was the song that was first released from her album before her album was dropped. The album which broke records, like a ton of
Yeah.
records. And I think, a big part of this too was the album was so hyped up and the song was so hyped up. It was more than just a music video. It really became, they show like news outlets saying Billie is a Satan worshiper because of the music video, and she's like
Yeah.
cracking up. And the billboards out here, in LA, and this is where she's from, so getting to see her face and her sitting on the bed and like her vision just come to life. I do think she has to give credit to the directors and the producers who made it happen because it turned out really well.
Yeah.
And working in collaboration is always better than one mind, but
Mhm.
you definitely see that side of her that's like a perfectionist and how much she really cares about what she's putting out for the world, even to the point that she doesn't trust a Hollywood producer
Yeah.
to do it for her or with her. And those moments of perfectionism come later too when they're writing songs for the album, which we'll talk about. But in this first half, we've seen so much behind the scenes of like not real life, right? Not a life we can relate to. We can't relate to filming music videos and performing in front of massive crowds.
Mhm.
But they really splice it up with normal or like real life moments, like her studying and taking her driver's test, passing her driver's test, all of that kind of stuff that we can relate to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot about Billie which is relatable. And she's really played on that. Like a big thing is that she is like a huge fan of The Office.
Mhm.
And as most people are, she did an interview with Rainn Wilson where he quizzed her on The Office.
Yeah.
That right there is like a beautiful PR moment
Yeah.
because now it's a crossover of two things people love and she's having fun with it. And that's what we like to see.
Yeah,
It
for
didn't
sure.
seem forced at all. So I thought that that was really cool. But it was good to have those like real life moments kind of in between all the things that are unrelatable to most people.
Yeah, because I feel like we definitely get caught up in the, like, stuff that we can't relate to and all the big, like, Hollywood of it, but at the end of the day, it kind of reminded us that she's only 19, well, I guess in the documentary 17, 18, but she's still young and she's still growing up and doing all of those normal people things, so it was fun to see it interjected between other scenes of her doing, like, celebrity stuff.
Yeah, and when, she passed her driver's test and then they were recording in the car and she was like, "All I wanted to do was drive, and meanwhile, I'm in a family my mom still has a minivan." She was
Yeah.
like she said, "Phineas drives a what?" Like a I can't remember what she
Somebody
said.
drove, like, a Mazda.
Yeah, it was a Mazda.
Yeah.
She's like, "Phineas drives a Mazda." She's like, "I'm here with a bunch of lames." Um, but even that I think is really important because obviously they have a lot of money.
Mhm.
Between Billy and Phineas, who are still living at home, there's a lot of money there.
Yeah.
And they're not changing their lifestyle. And that really shows like who their parents are, especially because they're in the industry, they know what can happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And, with all of this like behind the scenes, we're watching her record and write for this new album. And so many times she downplays her talent. Like she
Mhm.
says her voice isn't good enough. She feels pressure from album deadlines and feels like she can't finish it. But Phineas is always there. He's like amazing with the harmonies. And again, it just like reminds you of how amazing not only of a singer he is, but of a songwriter and of a producer. He truly was instrumental in helping Billie become who she is. And what's interesting is she's one of the only artists. There are some other out there that go by their name but are not a one man show. And that really is true for her.
Mm.
Nobody would come to a Billie concert if it was her singing with no Phineas,
Yeah.
right? Or no backup, whatever. And without Phineas to be there to push her along and help her and tell her that she is good enough, maybe there wouldn't have been this album.
Yeah, I love their dynamic. I think it's so unique and interesting to see a brother and sister duo. Because I know, like, if that was me and my brother, like, we would just not work. But I feel like they balance each other out so greatly, and there's this one great scene where I think they had just finished they were trying to record something and, Phineas says, "It sounds great," and she says, "It sounds pretty horrible," and he says, "I think it sounds kind of awesome," and she said, "It's pretty bad," and they kinda do this, like, back and forth, and she says that she sounds horrible and she can't sound good because she's not good, and he says, "You're very good," and again, she goes back and says, "No, I'm not," and he says, "Lots of people would agree with me that you're very good," and the scene kinda just ends there, and I just love it because it's like she needs somebody like that to tell her that she's good and, like, that she's a good singer and not just let her, like, doubt herself, which I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, really, um, I don't know if the word is selfless because it's not necessarily selfless. It's your sibling, you love them, but in a lot of ways contributing to her success, he was pretty selfless because Billy is who got the fame,
Yeah.
but he was the one hyping her up. He was the one producing, he was the one songwriting. He's in there on the harmonies
Mhm.
and playing the instruments and adding everything in. She's the voice, of course, she's the front man of the band, but never once do you see or feel like he regrets not being more famous.
Yeah. That's why I
When
think it
he
worked out so well, like, I think he is perfectly fine with doing the work and helping out, but not having kind of the I don't wanna say credit because he does get the credit, I mean, he has Grammys and stuff now,
well,
but
after the
yeah.
album dropped, yeah, but think about, like, the tours that happened for the song or before the Grammys even happened when the album came out.
Yeah, very true.
Nobody attributed it because when we I mean, I work in production, so it's a little bit different for me, but
Mhm.
before working in production or even sometimes when I'm listening to stuff, I'm like, "Wow, I love this song." And I'm like, "Oh my god, Billie is so smart," or "Justin Bieber is so smart," or "Whoever is so smart." And we forget that they did not do that.
Yeah.
They are instrumental because they did it the way
Mhm.
that it was supposed to be done, but it was somebody else's brain a lot of the times. Um, behind the scenes doing it, which is another reason why people like Ariana Grande are huge because she does her own songwriting too. There's
Mhm.
nobody else there behind the scenes, you know, doing that for her, maybe with her, but not for her.
Yeah.
And it is this like mentor relationship, I think, because Phineas could easily write the songs by himself,
Mhm.
right? But he's sitting there and he's pushing her to write them with him and to learn, even though she hates it, because it's a good skill to know. It makes you better as an artist.
Yeah.
So I agree. I love their dynamic.
Mhm.
Between when Ocean Eyes drops and she becomes famous, and then the music video drops for her new album, it's kind of a blur. There's like a lot of random snippets of time, but a lot of cool things that are shown. Like she goes on a radio show and she says that she would never attend. You know, they were like, "Oh, did you have to quit school or whatever for tour?" She's like, "Actually, I never attended school, and I graduated a long time ago because I was homeschooled." She also talks about how madly in love she was with Justin Bieber and how she doesn't think she could ever have a boyfriend because it would never compare to him.
Yeah.
And they credit her and congratulate her on selling out 3 times in her hometown theater, which is amazing. And they show a clip from it. And her guest appearance in the show was Khalid, which is huge. I mean,
Mhm.
um, I saw him one time and it was a sold out show. Like it was crazy. So to have him come and just guest appear for your concert is a really, really big deal.
Yeah, insane.
Also, during this time, we're introduced on screen to somebody who might be considered a friend. She has a lot of like acquaintances that are around her, but this one person, she's hanging on to him and she's like flirting with him. So you're like, oh, is this her boyfriend or what's going on?
Mhm.
And I literally, until watching this documentary, forgot about the Billy and boyfriend drama that happened a couple years ago. Maybe it was
I
like
had
last year.
I had, like, no knowledge of this until I watched a documentary, like, I did not know of this boyfriend at all. I mean, I love Billie Eilish, but I'm not, like, very invested in, like, checking up on her as I am with some other celebrities, but
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea that she was dating somebody, so that whole part was new to me.
Well, there people knew that she was dating somebody,
Mhm.
and that she had broken up with them because she was open about it at her concerts.
Mhm.
But what is very interesting is that people actually thought that Billie was gay or bisexual because of her song,
Yeah.
which we're going to talk about in a minute. So, quickly, I want to talk about Zanny because this is the next bit of the documentary. So, just in chronological order, this guy pops up and you're like, oh, maybe that's like something, but it's not really touched on much
Mhm.
more. And quickly, we're moving to Zanny, which came to fruition in the documentary and in real life in the same timeline. And Billy and Phineas are kind of explaining what the song means to them. They're saying, it's like when you're supposed to quit someone or something and you just can't because it's so addictive, even though you know it's bad for you. Like, there's more of a meaning there behind drugs, but obviously the drug
Yeah.
aspect was going to be the like pop culture catchy thing that people, are interested in,
Yeah.
unfortunately. um, but somebody who I would assume is her publicist, they didn't really introduce her,
Yeah, I think so.
starts questioning, like it's Billy and her mom and the publicist sitting in a room. And, she's like, they listen to the song and she's like, okay, I love it. It's great. But should we release this? Because you're releasing it now, but what happens in 15 years when you have a break and like do a drug bender, like,
Yeah.
get exposed for doing some drugs and then you're dragged for this or you're canceled for this. And her mom like snaps. Billy's
Yeah.
mom is just like, what? So we're not going to put out good music because she might do drugs one day or,
Mhm.
whatever. She's like, how about instead we put the song out and just teach her to be a better person and not do that? And, Billy's sitting there like eyes wide, like looking around, mom, please
Yeah, she's,
have
like,
your
kinda,
birthday.
like, laughing into the camera. She's like, "Oh my god, my mom's popping off right now."
Yeah, but honestly, well, it's one thing to note that Billie has been very open that she's never done any drug or even smoked anything,
Mhm.
which is ironic because you would think so, given what she sings about and who she hangs out with.
Yeah,
I think that both her publicist and her mom are right. Like, her publicist was doing her job.
I agree.
If Justin Bieber's publicist could have looked into the future and been like, okay, here's what's coming, I'm sure they would have made some different decisions.
Yeah.
And, you do isolate a certain group of people when you start singing about drugs, but that's another thing, right? So she talks about later how when her mom suggested she should create a song that's more inclusive, more poppy, that anybody could listen to or anybody could like, she says, she's like, we've always talked about this. I don't want to create music that's for everybody. I want to create music that means something to me, and the people who can relate are who listen.
Mhm.
Um, and so maybe the release of Zanny wasn't a bad thing. Like, maybe it was pretty on brand for her.
Yeah, I agree with you, saying that you agree with both sides, both the mom and the publicist. Like, speaking from the publicist's perspective, that's such a PR brain moment, like, you have to think about that stuff, and I think she's totally valid for bringing it up, and it was an interesting conversation because it sparked in Billie and her mom, like, their feelings about it, and obviously the mom was very defensive and was like, so we're just going to stop her from writing about things that she feels now and who she is now, authentically herself, just because something might happen in the future. And I totally agree with both sides, but that scene was funny, and Billie was kind of just like
Yeah.
laughing that her mom was going off, which is like a typical like mom thing. But I thought it was an interesting point to bring up.
Well, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and this is no shade to her mom, but like Billie says, she's like, I agree. After her publicist says that, she's like, actually, I agree. And
Yeah.
her mom is still just going off. You
Hmm.
would think that at that point, it's really, uh, you know, you have to step back and like remember that you're her mom. You're not her business manager. You're just her mom, and you're supposed to support her. So if she's getting advice from somebody who's there to help her in a business sense, and she's agreeing with
Yeah.
that advice, maybe just let it go. Maybe
Hmm.
it's okay to leave the song off the album, or maybe have Phineas there to be in that conversation because it is both of their work.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, because he seems pretty open to having conversations like that, how are things going to look? And it's also this moment of typical mom where they're like, my kid is never going to
Yeah.
mess up. They're never going to do drugs or whatever, but you don't know because you're not her and she's not a typical kid.
Yeah.
And that moment kind of circles back when she's doing the meet and greet, which we'll get into in a second. But something really important happens at this point in the documentary. Right after the conversation ends, she's with her publicist and they're looking at album covers for potentially for the album. And Billie has like a severe tic attack.
Hmm.
And when I say tic attack, I mean she, for those who don't know, has Tourette syndrome, and that's why she does, you know, unique face movements or like kicks her neck sometimes. Um, but they were saying that Tourette's can be, or these attacks can be induced by like being tired, being sad, stressed, just emotions in general.
Hmm.
Um, which was such a smart cut in the documentary because right after they're like, oh, it can be induced by stress. You see her cut to her backstage talking to that same guy who is now introduced as her boyfriend. He's distant, and she says to someone that's with her on tour, she's super lonely and hates Valentine's Day. She says that her boyfriend and a bunch of their friends, went on this trip without her or whatever and just left her alone. And I'm assuming that the stress of an average teenage relationship and tour probably induced her attack.
Yeah, this part of the documentary starts to go and starts to show you her struggles as a teenager on tour. Like, again, she's probably, what, I think 17 at this part, and I think she was in Europe, the European leg of the tour, so far away, and her friends are doing things back home, her boyfriend's doing things, and she kind of feels left out. Um, but I do think that obviously she loves touring and loves doing shows, and it was kind of this, like, she was torn between wanting to see those people, but not wanting to see them so bad that, like, she would leave this behind. Like, she still wanted to perform and do her own thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that she wants to be on tour, and there actually she's questioned about that on the radio show, where they say, "How do you feel about it?" And she's like, "I love it." No, it was on the Zach Sang show,
Yeah.
and his co-host, assistant guy, I forget his name, but he says, "Oh, really? You love tour? Because actually you tweeted like, I don't want to do this. Somebody save
Mhm.
me," or whatever. And it was a really interesting moment because it's like all of us want to be famous, but when you get famous, you don't think about what comes with that. And she was saying, like, I love tour, and when I'm there, I love it. But the idea of leaving my home, leaving my loved ones, people who need me is stressful. And we learned that the people who need her is this boy, and that's what's weighing
Yeah.
on her mind because really her family mostly goes on tour with her, they travel with her. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that she loves tour because you even see in the documentary, like, she gets severe shin splints and throws out her neck and her back from jumping
Mhm.
around so much. And she says, she's like behind stage, she's like, I'm just scared that I push myself so hard because I'm scared one day I'm going to wake up and all of this is going to be gone and I'm not going to be famous anymore. And that's when it cuts to her dancing classically.
Yeah.
And we learned that she loved to dance. She was actually well above her age class. I think when she was in eighth grade or a freshman, she was dancing with the senior class and she hurt her hip and had to stop. She said that that's when her depression really kicked in. And she's just like terrified of that happening with music. And that's understandable, I think.
Yeah, totally. That part was just depressing and heartbreaking for me because I think it was the Lady Gaga documentary as well. I think she had some injury, and I believe it had to do with dancing. I'm not sure exactly, but
Yeah.
something from that, and it's a large part of her documentary as well, is her injury and how that's affecting her so much, so
Yeah.
it
And I
was
mean,
sad to see.
Billy's concerts are not concerts. They're like hype shows
Yeah.
where everybody's like jumping and doing mosh pits. And so if she has to sit there and sit on the stage and not move, it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like what you came for. And she knows that. So she pushes herself, but you have to consider like she's already a fragile body because she's hurt her hip so bad. She already struggles, mentally with coping with all of this at the same time and having her own teenage angst and wanting to do the best that she can, being a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Um, and people, this is the point where people are like, why don't you write happy songs? And she says that you can't explain feelings, right? Like
Mhm.
somebody says, like, what do you want people to feel when they listen to your music? And she's like, I don't know. You can't explain it. You don't know why you like a song, you just do. She says she doesn't write happy songs because she doesn't feel happy. And to her, that's okay because she knows a lot of people are the same way. And that's why she doesn't consider her fans fans. She considers them part of her journey because they're not people who love her music. They're people who relate to her and who she relates to, like friends.
Yeah. Exactly. I That's another thing I love about her is I think she's just so authentic, and I loved when she said, um, "I'm not gonna write happy songs when I'm not feeling happy," which is I respect it because it's going against, like, I'm sure a lot of artists feel that way, but then are pressured by the record labels and people around them, commercially, like, that's the way to go, like, make happy songs, make a hit. Even when her record label had told Phineas that they wanted them to write a couple hit songs,
Mhm.
and he was worried and stressing about having to keep that a secret from Billie,
Yeah.
like, not let her know that it needs to be a hit song, but also write the hit song for them.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, this is jumping back into the earlier part of the documentary, but when she kind of interrupted on that conversation with him and her mom talking
Yeah.
about the hit songs, and she's like, okay, well, you guys are being hypocritical now because this is going against everything we kind of stood for and like preached about. So I love that she stays true to herself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is she knows that she can get a lot of internet hate, and the haters on the
Hmm.
internet will really bring her down. And if you produce something that you don't care about and it gets shit on, it's like, okay, this sucks. It's not who I am. People
Yeah.
don't like it, and I don't even know why I put it out. But if, like, Ocean Eyes, which is something she liked and she felt personally, gets hate, she knows why she put that out. It wasn't
Yeah.
for them, it was for her. So it doesn't matter if they like it or not.
Exactly.
And that's like respectable. And I think, a lot of artists, they do sell out to just continue to be famous. And that's why you see them struggle when they get older because it, or you have the reverse, which is Ariana Grande is a great example too, because she started kind of selling out. She started with the Nickelodeon and the kitschy songs. And then
Hmm.
she was like, actually, no, I'm just gonna see what I can do on my own, and then blew up. And
Yeah.
that's why her career trajectory is never ending, because as she changes, her fans will come with her
Hmm.
versus like, what's the next thing I can do to get, downloads and plays on the radio.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it seems like it was all working out for Billie because at this point in the documentary, it's like just rockets. Like she takes off, her album drops, Justin Bieber reaches out to her. He wants in
Hmm.
on it. He wants to do um, a remix with her. She appears on Jimmy Kimmel. She breaks records on Spotify and Apple. She jumps from 1 million followers to 16 million followers on Instagram in less than a year. And she books the headliner spot at Coachella. And you see her prepping and literally dreading this Coachella performance because she's so
Yeah.
nervous, which again humanizes her a lot. As somebody who goes to concerts, I never think about if the artist is nervous. I never do.
Hmm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
they're loving this moment. I'm loving this moment.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
It was
Coachella,
funny to.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
It was interesting to watch right before they left for Coachella. She had kind of all her bags packed and everything, and she was sitting on the front steps of her house, I guess, waiting for a car or something to come pick them up. And she was just like literally dreading it. Like
Yeah.
she was so nervous, and you could totally feel it through the screen. Like I felt nervous for her.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was just like, oh, but she's amazing. So,
Yeah. And in the car on the way there, she started having a Tourette's attack as well.
mhm,
She was so nervous. But I think a lot of what was left of the documentary from this point is really focused on Coachella, um, because it was an important point in her life and in her relationship. So this is such a big moment for Billie, and we should all just be talking about that. This piece of the documentary is really actually about her boyfriend. Unfortunately,
yeah,
you see her behind or backstage, like behind the scenes, talking to him on the phone, really hoping that he'll show up. She says to the camera, like, he begged me for tickets to Coachella, and I told him I'd get them for him if he promised to spend time with me, which red flag right there. Like,
yeah,
you are literally so famous, and we don't even know who this person is. You should not be begging anybody to spend time with you. And not even about fame, but nobody in a relationship should ever feel that way. And you
mhm,
shouldn't have to bribe them either with free Coachella tickets just so they'll spend time with you. She's upset behind the scenes because he told her that he would and then he isn't. She's like, come hang out with me. And he shows up for a little bit, but then leaves. And it's funny because this person is who she wants attention from. Meanwhile, before she's on stage, Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom just like casually want to hang
yeah.
out with her. And it's
I
so
love that part.
funny. It's so funny. She like Orlando Bloom is obsessed. Like
Yeah.
seriously, this was like he was fangirling.
Yeah. And
And
she didn't even recognize him, like, she wasn't sure until afterwards when Phineas and his girlfriend Claudia were like, "Yeah, he's from, Pirates of the Caribbean," and then it
yeah.
clicks in and she's like, "Let me go meet him again," like
Yeah, so it's funny because the first time they meet, and Katy Perry is so sweet too. She said,
Mhm.
"Buckle in. This next 10 years is going to be a wild ride." She was like, "I was there once, and if you ever need anything, reach out. You know, we love you." And Orlando Bloom is like in the background, like, "Oh my God, I love you so much." He says he goes hiking to her songs and like listens. Katy Perry was like, he never listens to anybody in the car, but he will play you on repeat. And
Yeah.
it's funny because she, you know, hugs him, whatever. Then, like you said, goes backstage. Phineas is like, oh, he's literally from Pirates of the Caribbean. And then when she meets him again, she hugs
Yeah.
him and she's like, my 9-year-old self is screaming. And I'm like, we were
It's
all
so funny.
screaming the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But, you know, these people, they love her. They care about her and they don't even know her. And meanwhile, her own boyfriend literally could care less what's going on. So you see her Coachella performance. She's introducing new music and she totally, totally forgets the words, which happens. It does
Mhm.
happen to everybody, even the best of them. But of course, because she's such a perfectionist, this like destroys her. So she finishes the set and then is devastated backstage. She's like crying. And you see her call her boyfriend and say, like, please come see me. I'm upset. I need support, which is what a relationship, you know, they're there for that
Yeah.
reason. And he literally says no. He says he can't. Like, what
Yeah.
are you doing at Coachella from tickets from your girlfriend, the headliner,
Mhm.
that you can't come see her? I personally don't understand that at all.
No, those scenes made me feel so sad for her and just so annoyed. Like, I was so sick of seeing this boyfriend. I never wanted to hear from him again. Like, it's the biggest moment of her career thus far was headlining Coachella, and she's like sitting there worrying about you and your whereabouts, and it just made me upset.
Yeah, and I think she felt the same way. Like, I think she really was holding on to him and wanted to help him, wanted to save him. She talks about how he has like anger management and
Mhm.
hurts himself. It gets to this point where it's like, now I'm hurting me to help you, and that doesn't necessarily make sense for me anymore.
Yeah.
And there's this moment, and I'm so happy for her that this happened. This went viral on Twitter after it happened in real life.
Mhm.
But after she performs, Ariana Grande is performing. She's also headlining, and Billie goes to watch her perform and sees Justin Bieber in the, you know, closed off space where they all go.
Yeah.
She loses her mind. And there's this moment, like they literally don't talk. This is what went viral because somebody was recording it. They just stare at each other. He's like, oh, he's like excited to see her. Oh, hey. And she will not talk. She stares at him. And then finally, you know, they're hugging and she just starts sobbing, like literally just
Yeah.
starts like hyperventilating, crying into Justin Bieber's arms,
Mhm.
which is so full circle. She just had her heart broken. She just had the biggest moment of her entire career thus far.
Yeah.
And the one person who she truly loves more than anyone is who is consoling her. I think when that kind of came full circle in her mind, like people who don't even know me love me. People even like
Mhm.
Justin Bieber. I don't have time for this dude anymore.
Yeah, it's such a sweet moment. I can remember the exact date that those videos were posted on Twitter of her meeting him, and I fun fact about me, when I was growing up, I'm a couple years older than her, but growing up my whole life, like, obsessed with Justin Bieber, like, full everything you can think
Believer.
of, like, yeah, full out. Um, and so watching all of the Justin Bieber kind of scenes in this documentary made me cry every single time. Like, it's embarrassing because that scene where she meets him and she's literally standing like 4 feet away from him and will not go up to him, and she's like hiding herself behind something. I'm like, I totally feel that. And It was such a sweet moment, and then they finally hug, and you're like you said, she breaks down, and he's just it's such an emotional moment. Like, I think it was kind of funny at first how she was, like, staying away from him, and then when they actually do embrace and she's, like, sobbing in his arms and he's, like, stroking her hair and just, like, trying to comfort her, like, for me, as a past Justin Bieber fan, I was just like it was such a sweet moment, just knowing everything he's been through, and he's kind of been through the same stuff, like, that she's going through now, like, 10 years ago, and just watching it again come all full circle was so sweet. I love that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's why he was so sweet to her. Like, he really relates. It really wasn't even
Mhm.
that long ago that he was going through exactly what she's going through.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure he came to watch her set, and I'm sure he saw her mess up, and I'm sure he knows how devastating that is and how upset she is by that. And he knows how much she is obsessed with him. She's not been quiet about it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I just think that the series of events worked out the exact way that they were supposed to.
Mhm, for sure.
And after this, she starts writing songs about people separating. And the reason that they separate in the song is for no reason other than it's just not working out. They just
Mhm.
don't want the same things. And when people are asking her like what the song means and stuff, this is when she talks about her separation with her boyfriend and how they were just at different stages in their lives and they just want different things, which honestly is very mature and understandable. I mean, it's hard because he's her age and he's not famous,
Yeah.
staying out with his friends, and she is jetting off across the country, winning Grammys. Like,
Mhm.
it's hard. That is the song that I was talking about earlier, I Wish You Were Gay. So this ends all the rumors. She's not saying, oh, I wish you were gay so you would love me. She's saying, I wish I had a better reason. I wish the reason was that you weren't attracted to me. You were
Yeah.
attracted to, like, you were gay and
Mhm.
we could still love each other from afar and there's no hard feelings. But actually, I just can't be with you anymore, which
Yeah.
is honestly a more heartbreaking story.
Yeah, it really is. When I made that realization, like, when I first listened to that song, I thought it was the former,
Same.
like, kind of explanation, and then when I realized the actual meaning behind it, I was like, "Wow, this is devastating."
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes so much sense now seeing it, like, watching him not care about her and then her maturing and being like, "Wait, this is not good for me."
Yeah,
Like, it's not.
she sounded really grown and way older than 17 or 18 whenever she's whatever age she's at talking about this part, but when she was like, "We're on 2 different, like, wavelengths, and I've tried to fix him and I can't, and I realize that, and I'm not gonna keep putting us through this, so I'm just gonna have to end it, and we're gonna have to leave it be and move on," which I thought was interesting to hear from somebody who's so young, that she
Yeah,
can realize that.
which makes her more of a role model, I think, to the kids that are her age watching her and watching this documentary. There's a lot of takeaways from this.
Mhm.
And, she releases the song on the album, obviously, and she's performing it, and she just starts crying on stage. And, Phineas is right there next to her and he just plays through it. She stops singing.
Yeah.
Everybody feels for her. And that shows how much she cares about what she's putting out. It's real. It's her feelings, it's her emotions. But of course, because she's on tour performing her album, you can cry on stage, you can be sad, but there are still things that have to happen. And one of those things
Mhm.
is a meet and greet. And this is full circle back to what I was saying about her mom. Like, in this specific meet and greet, she walks away. She's
Yeah.
told by her label that she's going to meet one family or one person in the label, but then it's like a line of people, and she wasn't expecting that. She's not in a good headspace, so she walks away. And her mom's like, "You can't walk away. You have to come back." Blah blah blah. She comes back. She puts a happy face on, and then in the car, she's upset because somebody has tweeted or commented on her Instagram post like, I heard that you were really rude at the meet and greet. I wasn't there. My friend was, but that's what they saw. And
Yeah.
even that comment gets to her. Even the person who wasn't even there, it's a third-hand account,
Mhm.
is enough to, make her upset. And she says, "I can't have one moment. Like, I literally can't have one bad moment because it's gonna blow up in my face." And think about that pressure. Think about going through, a heartbreak and performing so many shows. And at the same time, I mean, there's a scene in the documentary where they finish a concert, her and Phineas sit down, they write a song, they edit the song, and he's like, "We're millionaires. Like, in this
Yeah.
day, we've done all this stuff. Now we can say we're millionaires." But that's like a crazy work ethic, especially for
Mhm.
a 17-year-old.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it scares me a little bit because I'm like, she's doing a lot so fast, and I just want the best for her, and I don't want her to, like, burn out, and I don't know. I hope it goes well because it seems very intense, and I could never do that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like for her to actually be doing everything, but
I mean, when she goes backstage and says, "No, like, I can't," you see her start to have an attack, like
mhm.
a Tourette's attack. And she says, like, "I don't want to do it." She's obviously very stressed.
Yeah,
And still her mom's like, "No, you got to."
I know.
And I think, it's the her in her mom's mind, it's probably this is what comes with the territory. Like, you wanted to be famous, you are. You can't pick and choose. But we all, as a collective, her listeners, her family, her friends, have to keep in mind that she just has a really badass voice, but she still is a kid.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Mhm.
she's a kid. Even though the documentary ends, with this massive moment, all of this hard work, shin splints, heartbreak, crying on stage, not wanting to do meet and greets. I would say it was worth it. I don't know what she would say, but she is finally attending her first Grammys,
Yeah.
literally kills it, wins the top four
Sweet.
awards, and becomes the youngest ever to break that record of winning all four.
Yeah, that was
So,
insane. That whole last part of the documentary was I love how, like, they ended it on all the highs, and it was, like, a montage of just, like, win after win, and they kept, like, intercutting her winning each Grammy, and it was just crazy. I remember that night and just thinking, like, "When's the last time somebody did this?" Like, won all the big 4 categories. It's
and
insane.
it was sweet too because the first couple, she's like, "Wow, this is awesome. Thank you."
Mhm.
Like, you can see that she's kind of like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this. Like, thank you so much." But on that last one, she just cries.
Yeah.
And I think it was just like such a moment for her. Like, so much of this process I hated, and everybody told me, "Keep going. You're worth it. You're worth it. You can do it." And turns out I was. Like, turns out people do actually like me because you see, like, the people that she was competing against were intense. Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a buildup. It wasn't like Ariana Grande, who was one of her competitors, where
Mhm.
she was famous for acting and then slowly she like became a singer. It was like in 1 year, she dropped this album and blew up. Like, not many other people have done that.
Yeah. Which I'm finding interesting. I don't know if it's because 'cause I'm getting older and, like, fresh new celebrities are obviously younger, but I'm finding it so interesting lately that the last couple artists I've started to listen to, like, I have watched them from the very beginning and their journey, and Billie Eilish is probably one of the first, like, again, when Ocean Eyes was released until now, and it's so cool to watch those people grow, kind of alongside you, and I kind of am thinking the same thing with Olivia Rodrigo right now, like,
Oh yeah.
it's so interesting already to watch her, like, last year, I think, on her High School Musical show, and now putting out all her singles, and her album's about to come out, and I think she's just gonna keep blowing up, and it's so fascinating to watch it as it happens. Like, when I guess it's 'cause I'm older now, but, being younger with, like, Rihanna, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, like, I kinda came into their careers, like, they didn't start until or I
Hmm.
kinda came in once they were already established, so it's fun now in this, like, phase of my life to see people from the beginning of their careers and watch them grow
And
where they
I
are.
mean, that is how they create a severe fan base, an
Mm-hmm.
extreme fan base, because Justin Bieber was that for you. Like,
Yeah.
he started in your tweens,
Mm-hmm.
so now, like, you picked on him and you stuck with him all the way through. The
Yeah.
same thing for Ariana Grande, same thing for Billie Eilish for a lot of people. Olivia Rodrigo is a little bit different because she, just like Billie, really started getting popular via TikTok and
Yeah.
the TikTok trends that were going around with driver's license, but it was full grown adults making videos to her content, to her
Yeah.
song. So, she's going to be a very interesting experiment to watch, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just going to be 14-year-olds that are like going through their first relationship and feel like their heart is broken. It's like full adults that are invested in her and the story and the music and what's coming next.
Yeah.
So I think the takeaway of this documentary for me was to remember that, especially these younger celebrities, they really do have feelings. They really are under a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And also to give credit to their team, because people like Phineas are really doing a lot as well.
Yeah. The biggest takeaway for me, I think, was because I wasn't really aware of this before watching the documentary, was how like musical her family is, like from the beginning. I mean, I didn't know that her dad and her mom are both into music and had kind of taught Phineas and her um, instruments and singing, and just I feel like there was such a family focus on the documentary. Like there's so many scenes that we go back to where her parents are being interviewed and just giving their insights on things, and it's so, even at the Grammys at the end, I think they were in like a press conference or something, or an interview, and Phineas and Billie were asked, like, you grew up in a household like full of instruments and everything, if those weren't in the
Mhm.
home, would you be making music today? And they said, like, I don't know, like probably not. Like their parents were so supportive and patient and allowed them to like express their creativity and follow their passions, and I think that's amazing. Like I think that was like the biggest lesson for me, was like, as a parent, like let your kid experiment with things and try things out and always be there for them, because obviously it worked out for these guys.
Yeah. Obviously, with both of their kids sweeping the Grammys,
Yeah.
I'd say so, yeah. Yeah, so the documentary was amazing, and it's awesome to have conversations like this about it, but I still recommend watching it, because you take away something from listening to people talk about it, and you take away something from seeing it with your own eyes. So
Mhm.
it's definitely worth the watch. It is streaming on Apple TV right now. That's where you can find it. I definitely recommend watching it. It was a great documentary.
Yeah, highly recommend. I loved it.
Thanks so much for listening. Seriously, it has been so much fun talking to you. I'm so glad we found this topic to talk about, because I think a lot of people
Yes.
are going to be interested in it and interested in Billie in general. But if you want to listen to more of my episodes, you can find me on Megan the Morning podcast on all platforms, and you can stream my podcast anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to If You Know, You Know, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow me on Instagram at IYKYK podcast.